What is the Joe Rogan podcast if there's not a guest on? It's pretty much nothing. I'm sure he could talk about stuff, but what would he talk about? Metasphere. Is that even the right word? I feel like I'm becoming a grandma. I'm like, is that the right word to use? I don't know how it started happening, but I've used it twice now and I'm scared. This is a slippery slope to being an adult. That's what it says. Our podcast going downhill. Yesterday I watched a video and it was called The Downfall of the Modern Podcast, and it was by a guy called, I want to say James Smith, but that doesn't sound like a real human's name. So tell me about your chakra stone business and like me be okay with that, because personally I know that I don't believe in chakra stones, but as far as I'm aware, I do not know about any science about chakra stones. Today in the sort of podcasting, tech space, social media, content creation, metasphere. Is that even the right word? I don't know. I feel like I'm becoming like a grandma. I'm like, is that the right word to use, my lovely? I actually started using the phrase my love at work. I don't know how it started happening, but I've used it twice now and I'm scared. I'm like, this is a slippery slope to being an adult. So yes, I am one of those people that now calls old cute people my love. Yes, I'm one of those. I don't quite know what else to call them. It just sort of happened. Lots of other people use it. So I was like, I don't know. It slipped out of me and it was uncontrollable. A bit like the diarrhea I just had. So today we're actually doing a different method. I've been writing on the iPad. And I've written, my handwriting is pretty disgusting, I'm not going to lie, like it is doctor's handwriting to the max. Here it is, and it says, our podcast, do you know, I don't even know what it says, going downhill. That's what it says, our podcast going downhill. Because yesterday I watched a video on YouTube. And it was called The Downfall of the Modern Podcast or something. And it was by a guy called, I want to say James Smith, but that doesn't sound like a real human's name because it's like two, like, you know, John Smith, James Smith. I think that was his name though. But it's like, that's a pretty cardboard cutout name, isn't it? So as somebody who has a podcast, I was like, oh, fuck. Like, it was kind of concerning. And I kind of get it. I'm not the kind of person that watches. I've watched a couple of episodes. I can't lie to you. I have watched a couple of the podcast Diary of a CEO. It's done by Stephen Bartlett, who is an entrepreneur, businessman. He's also on Dragon's Den, FYI. If you don't know what Dragon's Den is, then it's basically like loads of entrepreneurs with loads of money go and invest into people's like business ideas. And he is one of the people on there, and he's well into like influencer marketing, and he's well into like new stuff. So, you know, mainly like content creation and stuff like that. And I realised after I'd watched a bit of Dragon's Den, I was like, oh shit, that's the guy from Dragon's Den. And I was surprised that he had a podcast. I was like, this is really weird. Anyway, he started off doing, I don't really know actually, because I don't follow it. I've watched two, like I said, but I've heard recently that he's moved from these kind of episodes where he talks about people's like, and I don't want to call them sob stories, but they are sob stories of their lives. And he's, you know, there's only so many sob stories you can listen. The ones I listened to were Cole Sprouse. I can't even remember now. Cole Sprouse. The one from Zack and Cody, Sweet Life of Zack and Cody, etc. from Disney, the Disney Channel. And I watched another one. Oh, it was the Arya Stark. I don't know. Maisie something. Anyway, she's Arya Stark on Game of Thrones. I watched those two because I was interested in the people, not because I wanted to listen to Stephen Bartlett's podcast. And the reason why, probably one of the main reasons why I don't have guests on my podcast is because I want it to be about me. No, I want it to be... I don't want it to become like, who have I, what guest have I got on? Like, I will have guests at some point, but I don't want it to be like, oh, I need to get this guest, otherwise no one will watch my podcast or listen. And, I want it to be able to stand on its own. I don't want it to be reliant on guests, although I will eventually have guests in the future. And I have had some of my friends on, which, to be fair, I think I probably prefer. Now, have I had people wanting to come on the podcast with me? Yes. / I've had people send me like, oh, why don't you interview this person? But then I'm like, okay, I'm going to be brutally honest. Basically, I don't believe in some of the stuff that they do. And I don't personally love conflict. I think that's how I struggle in the content creation sphere, because I very much don't like conflict. I don't like arguments. I don't mind heated discussions, but I would want the people that I'm interviewing to go into it knowing that I'm going to disagree with them. I don't want them to think like I'm going to be like, so tell me about your chakra stone business, and like me be okay with that. Because personally, I know that I don't believe in chakra stones, and there's no science behind them. So I'm like, well, actually, I haven't checked that. Sorry, I haven't actually checked that. There might be. But as far as I'm aware, I do not know about any science about chakra stones and their efficacy. But I know that people believe in them, and I think that's important. I'm like, well, placebo is a thing. If people believe in it and it's sort of meditative to use them, I don't disagree with that. But I don't know whether some people say that, oh, this is going to cure cancer, not necessarily related to chakra stone, but in relation to other things. And I'm just like, no, soz. So there is my dilemma. Now, do I want to have good chats with people? Absolutely. Do I think my podcast would step up a little bit if I was interviewing people? Yes, but I'm also, I don't want to say this because I don't want to like label myself as this, but like I think it's probably true. I am a bit impatient and I can talk a lot. So I don't know how well it would, I really need to rein myself in. I get a bit overexcited when there's other people here and I want to like talk. So yeah, don't worry. I will have some people at some point. Firstly, I don't actually have the setup for it right now. I've only got one microphone. That's a problem. And also, I want to interview people in person. And I know that's not necessarily possible here. So there is another problem. So basically, let's go back to this video. He basically said, and he named some of the top podcasts, and I kind of got it. Like, I was a bit like, what is the Joe Rogan podcast if there's not a guest on? It's pretty much nothing. Like, what is it? Like, it relies on a guest, and that's it. Like, I don't understand what the Joe Rogan podcast or experience, as that was called, what it would be if it didn't have a guest on it. I'm sure he could talk about stuff, but what would he talk about? So that's kind of my thinking behind it. And I think his name was James Smith, but now I'm like, whose name is James Smith? Come on, is it really James Smith? I'm going to check it. Fuck, his name is James Smith, and I've just been like absolutely ripping into his name. Sorry, James Smith. Mine's not that boring, but like Dawn is an old person name, so I get it. Like, don't worry. You can rip into me as well. So he basically said, once you've exhausted all the top experts in every field, like, yes, you could get them on again, but people want more. They want more. And everybody always wants more. They're like, okay, another guest, please. And as soon as you've exhausted all the reputable ones, you start going, right, well, where next? Everyone else has done that guest, so I don't want to also bring them on. So then you start getting people who are going to be a bit more controversial. I'm basically summarizing this video for you. And as a result, they are people who get engagement. They're people who get views. They're people who get engagement, I mean like comments and likes and dislikes and shares. But they also might therefore be people who provide incorrect information. And often when I've been, creating my videos and I've been on my podcast and stuff, I have, not necessarily on my podcast because I do try to be like, pretty factual and stuff on this, but when I'm doing my videos, I'm like, do you know what? Some of the time I'm really reluctant to make like sweeping statements because I know that like it's not completely factually true. Like, yes, you could say that the grass is green, but the grass isn't always green. The grass can be brown. The grass can, if it's dry, the grass can be yellow if it doesn't have enough sunlight. Do you know what I mean? So I don't want to say the grass is green when it might not always be green. And I know that's a really like stupid statement, but it kind of elicits the point really. But what I've noticed is, you don't need to get everything right. And also it would be so fucking boring if I sat in a video and I was like, well, the grass is green, but not in Spain where it's dry and it's not green. And like it would kind of lose the momentum and the goodness of the video. But what I have noticed is maybe it's good to leave a little bit of an not inconsistency, and not incorrect, but like a little bit of a controversial, like, maybe that wasn't quite right, but it's okay because someone could comment on it. And then that, in your head, you're like, well, that could then create engagement and views and comments and etc., etc. So, it is a dangerous game. And the whole point that this James guy was making was if you start getting, this feedback loop of, ooh, if I get these guests on that are like providing incorrect information, then it will stir up the comments and it will get the engagement and I'll get loads and loads of views. But some of the comments that people were making were like, I don't know what to believe on this podcast now because one week I'm getting someone telling me the grass is green, next week I'm getting someone that's telling me that the grass is purple, the week after I'm getting someone who's telling me that grass doesn't even exist and it's a fucking concept and like you can't label grass. So, I'd like to say what I do because I obviously don't really have guests, and some of my videos are, I would say, more like scientific, factually based, like the matcha one I did, the caffeine one I did. Like I do actually, so what I do is I basically look at articles and I look at I basically analyze the scientific studies, which is kind of sad, isn't it? That's my spare time. But basically I go on to like reputable sources like NCB, I've forgotten what it's called, but that database of loads of studies. And I basically go through them and I go, well, that's not really a very reputable study. And I do mention that. I'm like, it's only of 10 people. You can't really trust that, and etc., etc. So I kind of critically analyze it. And I get my information from multiple sources. I don't just go, okay, well, ChatGPT told me that, plant-based protein powder is lower in saturated fat, so I'm going to take that as gospel. No, if ChatGPT tells me that, I'm going to then go and look it up as well. So, and also I always think that's not necessarily true for all protein powders, all plant-based protein powders. The reason why I'm actually looking this up on ChatGPT at the moment is because I've had really bad gas from my protein. I've started drinking protein shakes again. Tom, my boyfriend, gave me this free whey protein powder that he was going to throw away, and I was like, no way. Good pun. And so I have a plant-based one. I think it's pea protein, but I'm saving it for when I finish this whey one, and it's given me horrendous gas and a little bit of diarrhea. So not, bad, just runnier than maybe normal. So I treat everything pretty much skeptically. Whenever I read something, I'm like, where's the issue in this? Where is it? Because I'll find it, and I do. If I'm looking on healthline.com, they have sources at the bottom, so I will go and click on those and go and read them and check that what they've written is actually correct. Not that I don't believe them, of course. And then I thought, how could we as podcasters avoid it? Basically, it's difficult because I want to also give, you guys, the listeners, advice. I know you might not be podcasters, but I was thinking, like, how can you find like reputable, good podcasts to listen to that are going to give you factual information and are going to give you information that you can trust. So, but quickly, I'll just say, like, how could we avoid it as podcasters? But I don't know how relevant it is. But I was thinking, have some reputable guests. Well, that's the problem, is everyone's, been done. But yeah, I was thinking have a regular guest, because I think having a regular guest, like, people really love those kind of podcasts where you're kind of back and forwards, and you're just like having a conversation. It doesn't necessarily have to be like factual as such. I would say have a disclaimer on the video, and I try to have disclaimers on my videos and say, like, this is not medical advice, etc., etc. And people could say, it doesn't necessarily. Please go and check whether some of this information, blah blah blah, like something in the description or maybe at the start of the video. I wonder whether podcasters should actually be calling people out, and I don't know if they are. I don't know if people like Stephen Bartlett are saying, like, is that actually true? But then I watched a clip from a podcast, and I don't think he did call it out. And it was basically this study that was like incorrectly stated, like the results were incorrectly stated. And the thing is, if you're sat there in the moment, you are not going to question it if it sounds kind of true, because, if it sounds plausible, because you're in the moment, you're in a podcast, and then you're not going to be like, wait there, I'm just going to look that up. And, but if you're a big podcaster like Stephen Bartlett, then you could have somebody fact checking that along the way. Do you know what I mean? And then raising it in the podcast as like, wait there, that's not actually true. And that would cause some good controversy, but it would also highlight to the viewers or the listeners that actually this person's BSing. And, someone that's a smaller podcast might not be able to do that, but someone like him, like, he's got enough money to have a person that sits there. I mean, Joe Rogan literally has a computer and Googles stuff whilst he's podcasting. This one's like a tricky one. I mean, I have quite strong ethics, and that's because I am a doctor, and I'm like, I could lose my job if I ever say something that's like not true and like kind of rehash it as true. And also, like, I have quite, I guess, strong morals in terms of like, I want people to be able to trust me. I don't want people to be like, she's chatting shit. And I actually very much respect my position of authority and my position of trust as a doctor, which is, is it tragic to say that? I don't know. Like, I don't want it to be like, I don't want it to sound facetious, but I actually do. And I don't want it to sound like a power trip, but I do. I do respect my position of power, and I treat it with respect, I should say. Now, what could you guys do? Now, my biggest thing is listen with skepticism. Don't listen to something and go, right, okay, well, they said that, so it must be true. Listen to multiple sources. Like, don't just get your information from one place, and always be, on the lookout for, I don't want to say don't trust anyone, but maybe don't trust anyone. Basically, you have to think of these people like they are running a business and they probably want to sell something. Usually your viewership, your time, a product that they have, and so they want you to be engaged with the situation. Now, the thing is with Stephen Bartlett is he's probably getting views and like AdSense from that, but if people start to distrust his podcast, then I feel like people are going to start to distrust him, surely. So, maybe he's not going down the right path there. I everything that people say to me and everything that I hear and read, I always treat with skepticism. I'm like, yeah, but And I'm like, I have to find the kind of the true reality of that. And I think that's probably some of my like investigative skills as a doctor. Like whenever somebody says something, I have to really like drill into it. And people, I think, you know, some people are like, oh, I've had my pain for, I don't know, a while. And I'm like, what does that mean? What does a while mean? That could mean a few minutes. That could mean a few hours. That could mean a few years. Like, how long? And they're like, I don't know, like just a long time. And I'm like, no. I'm sure people get annoyed with me because I'm like, no, I need a time. Like, I need a time frame. And I'm like, you don't have to be specific. But is it months? Is it years? Is it minutes? And then they're like, oh yeah, so it's like months. And I'm like, okay, less than 6 months, more than 6 months, just give me an answer. So yeah, I will always take everything with a little bit of a pinch of salt. And in terms of like, how can you interact with podcasts? I mean, I don't want to be like, you know, you should like listen to my podcast because I'm reputable, but I mean, I like to think that I am. But again, you know, I can only go with what I've taken from stuff. Like, don't take me as gospel. And, you know, anybody that says you should believe them verbatim, don't trust that. And I would say, you know, don't engage with kind of fake newsy videos that are like trying to lull you one way or the other. And that includes disliking them, because the YouTube algorithm doesn't understand, well, it probably does, but it doesn't distinguish between a like and a dislike. Both are equally, like, they're both engagement, and therefore it will keep pumping out the video to more and more people, even if people dislike it. So, and comments as well. It doesn't like figure out, okay, that's a negative comment, like, let's not push this out to people. It goes, right, it's a comment, it's a like, it's a share, and you might be sharing it to your friend and be like, oh my god, this is like the worst thing I've ever seen. But like, that is still positive engagement for the YouTube algorithm. So if you see shit like that, just don't engage with it. Like, don't even dislike it. Just leave. Click off, swipe away. Now, there we go. I think that's probably it, my friends. That's kind of off, a little bit off topic for my usual ones. I have done some on podcasts before, and, you know, people have listened and I'm sure they've enjoyed it. But, yeah, I just wanted to do one because I like to chime in every so often on the podcasting space and be like, you know, you are listening to a podcast, right? Literally, I'm talking to you. You are listening to a podcast, so you should know the back end of it. And I think you should, you know, as somebody who listens to podcasts, you should be aware of the fact of what's going on. And not saying you don't know, but like, maybe you didn't know that because the YouTube algorithm didn't suggest that video to you, because, you know, I'm the kind of person that would watch that video. But I'm just relaying the message. Don't shoot the messenger here, friends. Okay, anyway, guys, thanks so much for listening. I am very glad to have your acquaintance, but I should probably go to bed because I've got an early gym sesh. When I say early, it's like 11:30 in the morning, so it's like, it's not early. Anyway, thanks so much for listening. If you liked it, give it a like, subscribe, follow, whatever it is you do, and leave a comment down below. What did you think? I haven't heard from you guys in a while, so it would be nice. And yeah, I upload every Monday and Thursdays. If you're listening on the podcast, you can also go watch on my YouTube channel or listen on my YouTube channel now. I now have a RSS feed on there, so it's audio only, as well as the video. Probably a bit confusing, but I don't know, I thought I'd give it a go. And if you're listening on YouTube, you can also listen on the go, either on my new RSS feed, as I just mentioned, or you can go to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, literally anywhere you listen to podcasts, and it's on there. And I also have a website as well, but you could just search Backseat Positivity if you want to find that. But anyway, thanks so much, and I will see you in the next episode. Bye. Have a good time. I was going to say day, but it might not be day. Have a good existence. Bye.